thought I'd never recover, until my success became his biggest regret. The day he broke me. The day my husband walked out of our apartment, he looked me in the eyes and said, "You'll never make it without me." At that moment, I believed him. 1 year later, those words became the biggest mistake of his life. My name is Sophia Mitchell, and this happened in Seattle, Washington. For 8 years, I believed I had married my best friend. When I met Ryan Mitchell, he was funny, ambitious, and kind. We were both in our 20s, working ordinary jobs and dreaming about a better future. We rented a tiny apartment, shared one old car, and promised each other that no matter how difficult life became, we would always face it together. Back then, love felt simple. Every Friday night, we'd order cheap pizza, watch movies, and laugh about our dreams. Ryan always said, "One day, we'll have a beautiful house overlooking the water." I believed every word. As the years passed, Ryan's career took off. He became a successful financial consultant. His salary tripled. He bought expensive suits, started driving a luxury SUV. People admired him everywhere he went. Meanwhile, my own career stood still. Not because I lacked talent, because every time Ryan needed support, I stepped back. I turned down promotions to relocate with him. I worked flexible jobs so I could manage our home. I handled the bills, appointments, groceries, laundry, and everything else that kept our lives running smoothly. I told myself, we're a team. His success is our success. But somewhere along the way, Ryan stopped seeing us as a team. The changes happened slowly. He stopped asking about my day, stopped thanking me, stopped noticing the little things I did. One evening, after spending hours preparing his favorite dinner, he came home nearly an hour late. He barely looked at the table. "I'm not hungry. Business dinner." Then he walked upstairs. The food stayed untouched. So did my heart. Over the next few months, Ryan became colder. His business trips became more frequent. He spent weekends with clients. Or at least, that's what he claimed. Whenever I tried talking about our marriage, he had the same answer. "I'm tired. Not tonight. You're overthinking." Eventually, I stopped asking. One Saturday afternoon, Ryan invited several coworkers to our apartment. I cleaned every room, cooked for hours, made sure everything looked perfect. During dinner, one of his colleagues smiled and asked, "So, Sophia, what do you do?" Before I could answer, Ryan laughed. "She mostly takes care of the house. She's lucky she has me." Everyone chuckled politely. Sophia forced a smile. But inside, she felt invisible. Years of love, years of sacrifice, reduced to a single careless sentence. That night, after the guests left, I finally confronted him. "Why would you embarrass me like that?" Ryan shrugged while scrolling through his phone. I was joking. It didn't feel like a joke. He looked up. "You've become too emotional." Then he said something I would never forget. "Honestly, without me, you wouldn't know how to survive." The room became silent. Those words cut deeper than any argument, because they weren't spoken in anger. He truly believed them. I didn't cry, not in front of him, but later that night, lying awake beside someone who suddenly felt like a stranger. I asked myself one painful question. Had I spent 8 years building someone else's life, while forgetting how to build my own? I had no idea that this question would become the beginning of everything. The truth that changed everything. The next few weeks felt like I was living with a stranger. Ryan still came home every night. He still wore his expensive suits. He still talked about business meetings and new clients. But the warmth that once filled our home had disappeared. Our conversations became shorter. Our dinners became quieter. Sometimes, we spent an entire evening in the same apartment without saying more than a few words. Deep down, I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know what. One Tuesday afternoon, I left work early because I wasn't feeling well. As I walked into our apartment, I noticed Ryan's laptop sitting open on the dining table. That was unusual. He never left it behind. Just as I walked past it, a notification appeared on the screen. "Emily, last night was amazing. I already miss you, Red Heart." My heart stopped. I stared at the message, hoping there was another explanation. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe it was meant for someone else. But then another message appeared. "Don't worry, she'll never know." The room suddenly felt smaller. My hands were shaking. I slowly opened the conversation. There were months of messages, photos, Weekend trips, hotel reservations, romantic plans. Ryan wasn't just having an affair. He was living a second life. Every business trip, every late-night meeting, every excuse had been a lie. I closed the laptop and sat silently on the floor. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I simply cried. Not because he loved someone else, but because I realized he had stopped respecting me long before he stopped loving me. That evening, Ryan came home carrying flowers. For one brief second, I thought maybe he had remembered our anniversary. Then he handed them to me without even making eye contact. "Can you put these in water? They're for a client meeting tomorrow." I looked at the flowers, then at him. He had no idea what I already knew. The next morning, I called my older brother, Ethan. He listened carefully without interrupting. When I finished, he spoke calmly. "Sophia, you have two choices. You can spend the rest of your life asking why he changed. Or you can start asking what your future looks like without him." Those words stayed with me all day. For the first time, I imagined a life that didn't depend on Ryan. That weekend, while Ryan was supposedly away on business, I packed a small bag and visited my mother. She hugged me before I said a single word. "Mothers always know," she whispered. I finally broke down. Between tears, I told her everything. She listened quietly. Then she held my hands and said, "When you were a little girl, you used to believe you could do anything. What happened to that girl?" I couldn't answer, because somewhere over the years, I had forgotten her too. When I returned home on Sunday evening, Ryan was sitting in the living room. "We need to talk," he said. I sat across from him. He took a deep breath. "I don't think this marriage is working anymore." For a moment, I simply looked at him. The man who had promised to love me forever couldn't even tell me the truth. He spoke about growing apart, about wanting different things, about needing space. But he never mentioned Emily. He never admitted the betrayal. He wanted to leave without taking responsibility. I quietly stood up, walked to the bedroom, returned with a folder. Inside were printed screenshots of his messages. I placed them on the coffee table. Ryan's face turned completely pale. For the first time, he had nothing to say, and I realized something. The hardest part wasn't discovering the truth. The hardest part was accepting that the life I believed in no longer existed. The day I lost everything. Ryan stared at the screenshots spread across the coffee table. For the first time since we had met, he had no excuse, no clever explanation, no confident smile, just silence. Finally, he looked at me and sighed. "I wasn't planning for you to find out like this." Those words hurt more than I expected, not because he admitted the affair, but because it sounded like the only mistake he believed he had made was getting caught. I looked at him with tears in my eyes. "Were you ever going to tell me the truth?" He lowered his head. "I don't know." That answer told me everything. The next morning, Ryan packed 2 suitcases. He walked through the apartment as if he were checking out of a hotel. No emotion, no regret, just another task to complete. Before leaving, he stopped at the front door. "Sophia, I think this is for the best." I folded my arms. "For who?" He didn't answer. Instead, he picked up his keys. Then he looked at me one last time and said, "You depended on me for years. I honestly don't think you'll make it on your own." The door closed behind him, and with it, 8 years of marriage came to an end. The apartment suddenly felt enormous. Every room echoed with silence. His coffee mug still sat in the kitchen. His favorite jacket still hung in the closet. The framed wedding photo remained on the living room wall. I stood there for several minutes before taking it down. Not because I hated the memories, because I couldn't keep living inside them. A week later, reality hit harder than heartbreak. Ryan had always handled most of our investments. The rent on the apartment was too expensive for one salary. Several bills were due. My savings were far smaller than I had imagined. For the first time in years, I was truly on my own. That night, I sat at the dining table surrounded by paperwork. Rent, insurance, utilities, car payment. I whispered to myself, one step at a time. It wasn't confidence. It was survival. The following weekend, Ethan came over with pizza. He looked around the apartment. "You don't have to stay here." "I know, but I want to." He nodded. Then he noticed a notebook lying on the table. "What is this?" "My old business ideas. Years earlier, I had dreamed of starting a small consulting company to help local businesses improve customer service and office operations. I had written dozens of ideas, marketing plans, budgets, business names, but after marrying Ryan, I had tucked the notebook away and forgotten about it. Ethan smiled. You wrote all this years ago. So why did you stop? I looked down. Life happened. He gently pushed the notebook back toward me. Maybe life is giving it back. That night, I stayed awake until almost 3 a.m. I read every page. Some ideas were outdated. Others still felt surprisingly good. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about Ryan. I was thinking about my future. And that felt different. It felt hopeful. The next morning, I made a decision. Instead of asking, why did this happen to me? I asked, what can I build from here? I updated my resume, created a professional LinkedIn profile, reached out to former coworkers, and started researching how to launch a consulting business. It was scary. I had no guarantees, no wealthy investors, no perfect plan, only determination. Meanwhile, Ryan's new life wasn't as perfect as he had imagined. Emily enjoyed expensive dinners, luxury vacations, and designer shopping. But she wasn't interested in the long nights, hard work, and stress that came with building a future together. Their relationship was built on excitement, not trust. Ryan ignored the warning signs. He believed he had made the right choice. For now, one rainy afternoon, I received an email from a local entrepreneurship program for women starting small businesses. I had almost forgotten I had submitted an application. My hands trembled as I opened it. Congratulations, Sophia Mitchell. You've been selected for our 6-month business launch fellowship. The program included free business training, professional mentors, office space, and funding opportunities for promising entrepreneurs. Tears filled my eyes. It wasn't just an acceptance letter. It was proof that someone believed in me. Maybe, for the first time in years, I was finally starting to believe in myself too. But I had no idea this opportunity would completely change my life. And one day, the man who walked away believing I would fail would be standing in the crowd, watching my success with tears in. The comeback no one expected. 3 months later, my life looked completely different. Every morning, instead of crying over the past, I drove to the business launch fellowship in downtown Seattle. For the first time in years, I wasn't living for someone else's dreams. I was building my own. The program was challenging. We studied marketing, finance, leadership, branding, and entrepreneurship. Every week, we presented new business ideas to experienced mentors. Many participants already owned small businesses. Others had impressive resumes. I felt intimidated. Sometimes I wondered if I truly belonged there. One afternoon, our mentor, Grace Anderson, asked everyone a simple question. What makes your business different? One by one, people shared their ideas. When it was my turn, I stood nervously. I want to help small businesses improve their customer experience and internal operations. Grace smiled. And why you? For a moment, I froze. Then I answered honestly. Because I've spent years solving problems behind the scenes. I know what it feels like to work without recognition. I know how businesses succeed when people work together. The room became quiet. Grace nodded. That's not just experience. That's leadership. For the first time in years, someone recognized my abilities before I even recognized them myself. Over the next few months, I worked harder than ever before. Some nights I stayed awake until 2 a.m, writing proposals, designing presentations, building my company's website, meeting potential clients. Every small victory gave me more confidence. Slowly, my consulting business began attracting its first customers. A local bakery hired me, then a dental clinic, then a family-owned furniture store. Each success led to another recommendation. Word spread faster than I expected. One Friday afternoon, Grace called me into her office. I have someone I'd like you to meet. A man in his 50s stood up and shook my hand. David Collins. He owned one of Seattle's fastest-growing hospitality companies. I've heard great things about your work, he said. I need someone to improve operations across my restaurants. He slid a contract across the table. It was the biggest opportunity of my career. The value of the project was more money than I had earned in an entire year at my previous job. I tried to stay calm, but inside, my heart was racing. I'd love to work with you, I said. David smiled. I had a feeling you'd say that. Meanwhile, Ryan's world was beginning to crack. His relationship with Emily had changed. The excitement that once brought them together was fading. Arguments became frequent. Trust disappeared. One evening, Emily looked at him and asked, "If you could leave your wife, how do I know you won't leave me someday?" Ryan had no answer. For the first time, he realized that relationships built on betrayal rarely create lasting peace. A few weeks later, I launched my company's official website, Mitchell Business Consulting. Seeing my own name on the homepage made me emotional. For years, my identity had been tied to someone else's last name and someone else's success. Now, people were hiring me because they believed in my work. Not because of who I had married, but because of who I had become. One evening, Ethan visited my office. He looked around proudly. "I remember when this was just a notebook." I laughed. "So do I." He smiled. "Do you ever think about Ryan anymore?" I paused. Then I answered honestly, "Not as often." "What changed?" I looked around the office. The whiteboard covered with ideas. The client files. The framed certificate from the fellowship program. My future became bigger than my past. Ethan smiled. "That's the best revenge." I shook my head. "No, this isn't revenge anymore. It's freedom." That same night, across town, Ryan scrolled through LinkedIn before going to bed. A familiar name appeared on his screen. Sophia Mitchell, founder and CEO, Mitchell Business Consulting. Below the profile was a recent article celebrating her company's rapid growth and praising her innovative leadership. Ryan stared at the screen for several seconds. He clicked the article, read every word, then quietly whispered, "How?" He remembered the woman he had once told, "You'll never make it without me." Now, the entire business community was beginning to notice her success. And for the very first time, Ryan wondered if the biggest mistake of his life wasn't leaving Sophia. It was underestimating her. The woman everyone was talking about. 6 months later, Mitchell Business Consulting had grown far beyond anything I had imagined. What started as a tiny office with one desk and one laptop had become a thriving business. I had 5 employees, dozens of loyal clients, and a waiting list of companies asking for consultations. Every success reminded me of one simple truth. I had never been weak. I had simply spent years believing someone else's opinion of me. One Monday morning, my assistant, Jessica, walked into my office carrying a newspaper. "You should see this," she said with a huge smile. Across the front page of the business section was my picture. The headline read, "Seattle Entrepreneur Helps Local Businesses Thrive." For a moment, I just stared at it. A year earlier, I had been sitting alone in my apartment, wondering how I would pay my bills. Now, people were reading my story over breakfast. Not because I had married a successful man, but because I had become successful on my own. That afternoon, I received an invitation from the Washington State Small Business Conference. They wanted me to deliver the opening keynote speech. I laughed nervously. "Me?" Jessica smiled. "They're not inviting the old Sophia. They're inviting the woman you've become." Meanwhile, Ryan's life was moving in the opposite direction. His relationship with Emily had completely fallen apart. The excitement that had once seemed so perfect disappeared under constant arguments and mistrust. One evening, Emily packed her bags. Before leaving, she looked at Ryan and said, "If he'll betray one woman, he'll eventually betray another." The apartment door closed. Ryan stood there alone. The silence felt painfully familiar. Only now, there was nobody waiting for him. Nobody cooking dinner. Nobody asking how his day had been. For the first time, he understood the value of the little things Sophia had done every single day. A few weeks later, I was finishing a presentation when my phone buzzed. It was an email from a national business magazine. They wanted to feature me in their monthly issue. The editor wrote, "Your journey from heartbreak to entrepreneurship is inspiring thousands of readers." I leaned back in my chair and smiled. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about proving that life doesn't end after disappointment. Sometimes, it begins there. That Friday evening, Ethan invited me to dinner. As we walked through downtown Seattle, he stopped in front of a bookstore. A large display in the window caught my attention. One of the business magazines featuring my interview was sitting right in the center. Ethan laughed. Looks like you're becoming famous. I smiled. I'm just trying to do meaningful work. He looked at me proudly. You know what's different about you now. What? You don't need anyone's approval anymore. I thought about that for a moment. He was right. The woman, who once cried herself to sleep wondering why she wasn't enough, was gone. In her place stood someone who finally understood her own worth. The following week, I walked into the conference hall to deliver my keynote speech. More than 500 entrepreneurs filled the room. As I adjusted the microphone, I noticed something unexpected. Near the back of the audience sat Ryan. He wasn't speaking. He wasn't smiling. He simply watched in silence. I took a slow breath and began. There was a time when I believed losing someone meant losing everything. The room became quiet, but sometimes losing the wrong person is the first step toward finding yourself. The audience listened carefully. Ryan lowered his eyes. Every word reached him. Not because I was trying to hurt him, but because they were true. For the first time in years, he wasn't looking at the woman he had left behind. He was looking at the woman he never believed she could become. And deep inside, he realized that success had never changed Sophia. It had simply revealed the strength that had always been there. The apology that came too late. The conference ended with a standing ovation. People lined up to shake my hand. Business owners thanked me for inspiring them. Young entrepreneurs asked for advice. For nearly an hour, I spoke with people who believed in my work. As the crowd slowly disappeared, I noticed someone standing near the exit. Ryan. He looked different. The expensive confidence he once carried had been replaced by quiet regret. He waited until everyone had left. Then he walked toward me. Hi, Sophia. I smiled politely. Hi, Ryan. There was an awkward silence. Finally, he spoke. You were amazing up there. Thank you. I never imagined. He stopped himself. I finished the sentence for him. That I'd make it without you. Ryan looked down. Yeah, I was wrong. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was simply honest. Ryan took a deep breath. I've replayed our marriage in my head 1,000 times. And every time, I realized I was too proud to appreciate everything you did. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. I thought success made me important, but all it did was make me selfish. I listened quietly. A year ago, I had dreamed of hearing those words. Now, they no longer had the power to change my life. I owe you an apology, he continued, for every time I ignored you, for every sacrifice I took for granted, for making you feel invisible, and for convincing you that you needed me. His voice cracked. I'm truly sorry. I looked into his eyes. For the first time, I believed he meant it. I smiled gently. Thank you. Ryan looked surprised. That's it. I nodded. I forgive you. Hope slowly appeared on his face. So, is there any chance we could start over? I took a slow breath, then answered honestly. No. His shoulders dropped. Not in anger. In acceptance. I spent years waiting for you to become the man I needed. I said softly. But while I was waiting, I forgot to become the woman I wanted to be. Ryan looked away. I understand. I continued. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, and it doesn't always rebuild what's been broken. Sometimes, it simply allows two people to move forward. He nodded. I wish I had understood that sooner. So do I. As I picked up my bag, Ryan asked one last question. Were you ever happier with me than you are now? I thought carefully before answering. There were beautiful memories, and I'll always be grateful for them. But today, I'm happier because I finally know who I am. Ryan smiled sadly. I always thought you needed me. I smiled back. I needed to believe in myself. A few days later, I received another unexpected opportunity. A national business television network invited me for a live interview about entrepreneurship and resilience. The interview aired across the country. Messages poured in from people I had never met. Single mothers, college students, divorced men and women, small business owners. Many wrote the same sentence. Your story gave me hope. That meant more to me than any award, because success wasn't just changing my life anymore. It was helping others believe they could change theirs too. That evening, Ryan watched the interview alone in his apartment. When the host asked, "What was the biggest lesson you learned?" I smiled and answered, The moment you stop waiting for someone else to recognize your worth, your life truly begins. Ryan quietly turned off the television. He wiped away a tear, not because I had become successful, but because he finally understood the woman he underestimated had never been ordinary. He had simply failed to see her value until she no longer needed. The moment he realized what he lost. 2 years later, Mitchell Business Consulting had become one of the fastest-growing business consulting firms in the Pacific Northwest. What began with one small office and a handful of clients had expanded into 3 cities: Seattle, Portland, Spokane. Our team had grown to more than 40 employees. Every month, we helped struggling businesses become profitable again. Sometimes, I walked through the office and smiled, not because of the success, but because I remembered the woman who once believed she wasn't capable of standing on her own. One Monday morning, Jessica rushed into my office. "Sophia, you need to see this." She placed a business magazine on my desk. The cover featured my photograph. The headline read, "The Woman Who Turned Heartbreak into a $1 million Business." I stared at the cover in silence. 2 years ago, I could barely imagine paying next month's rent. Now, people across the country were reading my story. I quietly whispered, "Thank you, not to fate, not to luck, but to the version of myself that refused to give up." A few weeks later, I received another invitation. This time, it came from the National Leadership Forum in New York City. More than 2,000 entrepreneurs, CEOs, and investors would attend. I had been selected as the closing keynote speaker. Jessica smiled. "This is the biggest stage of your career." I looked at the invitation. "It feels unreal." She laughed. "You've earned it." Meanwhile, Ryan's construction company was facing serious challenges. Several major contracts had been lost. His best employees had accepted offers from competitors. For years, Ryan believed success came only from hard work. Now he finally understood something else. Strong businesses are built on strong relationships. The lesson had come too late. The day of the leadership forum arrived. Bright lights filled the convention center. Television crews moved through the hall. Business reporters interviewed guests. As I waited backstage, the event organizer smiled. "Ready?" I nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." The announcer's voice echoed through the auditorium. "Please welcome entrepreneur, author, and business leader, Sophia Mitchell." The audience erupted into applause. I walked onto the stage. Thousands of people stood before me. I remembered the frightened woman who once cried herself to sleep believing she had no future. She felt so far away now. During the speech, I said, "People often ask me what motivated my comeback. They expect me to say revenge." I paused. They're always surprised when I tell them. It wasn't revenge. It was self-respect. The audience became completely silent. The day I stopped trying to prove my worth to someone else was the day my life truly began. The room exploded into applause. Near the back of the auditorium, Ryan sat quietly. One of his business partners had invited him to the conference months earlier. He never expected Sophia to be the keynote speaker. He watched as thousands of people stood and applauded her. His eyes filled with tears. He remembered every cruel word he had spoken. "You'll never make it without me. You're lucky you have me. You depend on me." Every sentence echoed inside his mind. Now, the woman he once underestimated was inspiring thousands of people. Not because she wanted revenge, because she had discovered her own strength. After the event, dozens of young entrepreneurs gathered around Sophia. One young woman approached with tears in her eyes. "Ms. Mitchell, I almost gave up on my dream after my divorce. Your story gave me the courage to start again." Sophia hugged her gently. "If my journey helped you believe in yourself, then every painful chapter was worth it." Across the room, Ryan watched quietly. For the first time, he understood that Sophia's greatest achievement wasn't building a successful company. It was becoming the kind of person who inspired others to rebuild their own lives. And standing there, watching the woman he once thought would never recover, Ryan finally realized the full weight of what he had lost. I didn't win because he lost, final. 3 years after my divorce, life looked nothing like it once had. Mitchell Business Consulting had become one of the most respected consulting firms in the country. We had offices in 5 states, more than 100 employees. Hundreds of businesses had trusted us to help them grow. But the achievement I was most proud of wasn't the company. It was the culture. Every employee was treated with respect. Every opinion mattered. Every success was shared. I had built the kind of workplace I once wished existed. One crisp autumn morning, I received an invitation that left me speechless. The American Business Excellence Foundation had selected me for its annual Visionary Leadership Award. It recognized leaders who had created successful businesses while making a positive impact on their communities. I sat quietly in my office reading the letter again and again. Then I smiled. This wasn't just recognition for building a company. It was recognition for rebuilding a life. The award ceremony was held in New York City. Business leaders, entrepreneurs, journalists, and investors filled the ballroom. The event was broadcast live. As I waited backstage, I remember the night Ryan walked away believing I would never succeed without him. Back then, I had believed him. Now, I was standing backstage, moments away from receiving one of the highest honors of my career. Life had a remarkable way of surprising us. The presenter walked onto the stage, and tonight's Visionary Leadership Award goes to... A brief pause. Sophia Mitchell. The audience rose to its feet. The applause seemed endless. I walked to the stage with tears in my eyes. Not tears of sadness, tears of gratitude. I accepted the award and stepped toward the microphone. The room became completely silent. I used to believe success meant proving someone wrong. I looked across the audience. But life taught me something far more important. Real success isn't about making the people who hurt you regret their choices. It's about creating a life so meaningful that their opinion no longer defines you. Many people nodded. Some wiped away tears. I also learned that failure isn't the end of your story. Sometimes, it's simply the chapter that teaches you who you really are. The applause returned, louder than before. After the ceremony, guests gathered for a reception. As I greeted people, I noticed a familiar face standing quietly near the window. Ryan. He looked older, more humble. He waited until the crowd thinned before approaching. Congratulations, Sophia. His voice was calm. You've achieved everything you dreamed of. I smiled. Thank you. He looked at the award in my hands. I used to think success belonged to the loudest person in the room. He laughed softly. I was wrong. I stayed silent. He continued. The strongest person was the one quietly holding everything together. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Ryan said the words I never expected to hear. I don't miss the marriage as much as I miss the person I failed to appreciate. His eyes filled with tears. I'll regret that for the rest of my life. I stepped a little closer. Ryan, we were both younger. We both made mistakes. The difference is, I chose to learn from mine. He nodded. I know. I hope one day I can become someone I'm proud of. I smiled warmly. I hope you do. There was no anger between us anymore. Only truth. Only acceptance. As I left the ballroom, reporters asked one final question. Ms. Mitchell, if you could say one sentence to the woman you were 3 years ago, what would it be? I smiled, then answered without hesitation. I would tell her, don't be afraid of starting over. One day, the life you think you're losing will become the life that saves you. That evening, I returned to my hotel room. I placed the award on the table and looked out over the lights of New York City. I thought about everything that had happened. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the loneliness, the fear. Every painful moment had led me here. Not because someone rescued me, because I finally rescued myself. I whispered with a smile. He thought I'd never recover. But the greatest victory wasn't my success. It was finding peace. Outside, the city sparkled beneath the night sky. Inside, my heart felt lighter than it ever had. Some stories end with revenge. Mine ended with freedom. The end.